Team Liquid going to be happy to have picked up a very decisive victory over Phoenix1 in the first game of this series. Of course, Phoenix1 is still our bottom place team, the struggling roster of all of them. So we're going to have to temper some of the
fabbbyyy, greatest player of all time, 100%
Exactly.
win rate, never lost when he's the starter in LCS. Yeah, it's
and we'll discuss his debut, but really the tone of this game was kind of set by the first blood. It was one of those things where Phoenix1 gets behind. Team Liquid has the allowance to do pretty much anything they want to do without fear of being punished by the team composition that Phoenix1 had built.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just looking at the draft phase in particular, the Hecarim is kind of cool to be pulled out. You get to see a Karma in the mid lane. All those things are well and good, but then if you look at the whole layout of the team composition, it was very much a low damage team.
Yes.
Karma building Athenes as the first item. Shen is never going to be a high damage top laner. Hecarim didn't build the Trinity Force. Like, I thought that's the whole reason you pick Hecarim, is so you can build the new Trinity Force because it's so good on him. Yeah. But they didn't do any of those things, right? So it was pretty much on Mash to do all the damage. He got zoned out in team fights by Dardoch. Just Dardoch, pretty much, in a lot of these fights was soloing him. So with that, they could stay in the game because they picked relatively decent laners, but beyond that, they weren't able to do much.
Yeah, exactly. Low damage, had no threat to get back onto fabbbyyy. The Azir pickup being huge was mentioned by Zyrene. If you're a team composition that needs to run at people to start a fight, Azir's the one thing that you don't want to play against, which does make me wonder why, especially against the likes of Phoenix, if you are planning on running a team composition like this, where's the Azir ban at?
Yeah, and if you're a lower damage team composition, like, Azir is great against tanks. He has higher sustained DPS on areas than pretty much anyone else I can think of. So you're like, all right, Hecarim can dive on him. He's going to blow him up one shot. No, he's not. So either their champions needed to be different or their builds needed to match the need of the champion.
Exactly. So ultimately, maybe hamstrung a little bit by their own champion select. Now, if we jump into the game, I do want to go 20 minutes in because Team Liquid did have a fair amount of control throughout the majority of it. But here is where we really did kind of see that for Phoenix1, or even with the missed arrow.
And this illustrates our point fairly well because it's a failed initiation on a gate. But then if you watch the way they came in, Pirean never makes it in on Karma, so he's like a little bit damaged. But watch how Mash on the right side of the fight there just gets sold by Dardoch as he runs into the turret, and that just allows the rest of Team Liquid to kind of do whatever they want, because with Karma out of the fight, it's literally a tank Hecarim and a Shen.
Right.
And
I was going to say, even though Zig did manage to kill fabbbyyy pretty early on in that fight, doesn't matter when both ADCs on both teams die, but you have an Azir versus a Karma that's literally sitting on an Athenes. As you mentioned, the damage per second from both of these teams that remains far in favor of Team Liquid. So ultimately, a huge victory for Team Liquid in terms of making it clean. Again, we do expect that against a team like Phoenix1 with this Team Liquid roster, but as they are bringing in fabbbyyy and, Dardoch having come back in, this is going to be a feel-good win for them.
Yeah, and they had such a rough start to the split. It's important that all of these guys gain momentum as they move throughout the rest of the split. And, we don't know how far-reaching this fabbbyyy versus Piglet AD carry thing is going to go, but the more wins and the more momentum they can pick up, the better. And if it unlocks the rest of the team to play more of their style and we get to see more Dardoch running wherever he wants, that's a good thing for Team Liquid.
All right, player of the game here was close, but it is going to go to Phoenix, 5-0-7 on that Azir, primarily just because of the amount of damage dealt.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the damage dealt the champions in that game, as I'm sure you'll be able to check on all esports in the little match history section. It's like my favorite thing to do after the games. But he's been slumping as well, and obviously that doesn't factor into the individual player of the game decision, but against the full tank team, him getting so fed so quickly really just allowed that game to convert. We've seen Reignover have some Olaf games where he gets a bunch of kills at the start, but he can't carry through the game. Fenix really finished this one off with how fed he was able to become.
All right, Dardoch would have been the other player to look at just because, well, one, he did pick up that first blood, and then with that early boots purchase off of the first blood gold, just kind of zipping around the map, looking to create chaos, and ultimately, in that fight that we saw, for example, being the backline threat. There was no way for Phoenix1 to stop an Olaf with his ultimate on because tidal wave's going to go straight through him. Bubble's not going to hit. It was just kind of like, well.
Basically, you speed him up with your mid lane Karma, but then you're like, what are we doing with our lives, man? You're using everyone to peel for Mash. That is actually a player I do kind of want to talk about a little bit, even though he's been out for a week. If you look at Mash's statistics, and this kind of carries over to last split as well, he takes such a large share of gold. He freezes a lot of lanes. The team loses map pressure. and then he fails to convert it into damage. Like, he had the highest CS per minute of anyone in the North American LCS coming into this week, and like the 8th highest damage for AD carries.
Right, something doesn't compute here.
Yeah, he is taking way more resources than he is using on the map, and that has to get better.
All right, and now, interestingly enough, Slushie is going to be subbed in to the mid lane for Pirean. So once again, I mean, this roster just still not finding its home. You know, last week Slushie was playing ADC. Now he's back in the mid lane role. So I can't imagine things are going to get any easier for them in Game 2. It is a different landscape of players, so maybe the idea is just as we change play styles and roster, maybe we find something that works.
And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This sucks for Phoenix1. They need to find something, and they need to find it quickly. The season's only so long. As Irene mentioned, after week 3, you're a third of the way through, and it's highly likely they'll be a third of the way through the season without a win. You can only hope that they find some type of magic and pull out a win.
All right, and they've got about 3.5 minutes to find the magic for Game 2. Slushie might be part of their answer here, but we're headed to a break, and when we return, it's Game 2 between Phoenix1 and Liquid. Don't touch that browser. We're back in just a few minutes.